The aroma of slowly simmered ragu filled the kitchen of Castello's, just as it had every morning for the past 50 years. In 2 hours, my mother-in-law would try to erase my grandmother's legacy from our menu. In 3 hours, she'd learn why some traditions can't be replaced by trends. My name is Isabella Romano, and at 34, I was about to lose my position as head chef at my family's restaurant, or so my in-laws thought. The molecular gastronomy equipment arrives tomorrow, Charlotte, my sous chef, reported quietly. Mrs. Castello already hired that consultant chef from New York. I nodded, stirring the ragu that had been cooking since dawn. 3 generations of my family had made this sauce exactly the same way. Now, Amanda Castello wanted to turn it into foam and spheres. Bella? My husband Marco appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking uncomfortable in his business suit. He'd chosen the corporate side of the restaurant business, leaving the cooking to me. Mom wants to start the menu meeting early. I wiped my hands on my apron, touching the worn recipe book in my pocket. The leather-bound volume had belonged to my grandmother, each page filled with the secrets that had built Castello's reputation over half a century. The restaurant's private dining room was set for a meeting, not dinner. Amanda Castello sat at the head of the table, sleek in her designer dress, while her husband Robert reviewed spreadsheets. The new consultant chef, Tyler Brooks, lounged nearby, radiating big city confidence. Finally, Amanda sighed as I entered. Now we can discuss the future of Castello's. I took my seat, noting the thick stack of new menu proposals before each place setting. The top page showed something called Deconstructed Heritage, apparently their idea of modernizing my grandmother's recipes. The numbers don't lie, Robert began, shuffling his papers. Fine dining is changing. Traditional Italian cuisine isn't drawing the crowds it used to. We need innovation, excitement, social media appeal. Which is why we've brought in Tyler, Amanda added. His molecular gastronomy approach has transformed restaurants across the country. Tyler leaned forward. I've reviewed your current menu. Very rustic, but imagine your grandmother's ragu as a foam, served with pasta powder and reconstituted herb spheres. Modern diners want an experience, not just a meal. I opened my grandmother's recipe book, letting the familiar pages fall open to the ragu recipe. The margins were filled with notes, not just about ingredients but about life. Remember, cooking is love made visible. And patience turns tomatoes into gold. Our customers come here for authentic Italian cuisine, I said quietly. Food that tells a story, that carries tradition. Customers don't know what they want until we show them, Amanda countered. Starting next week, we're implementing the new menu. All current dishes will be, she paused delicately, retired. Marco shifted in his seat. Mom, some of those recipes built this restaurant. And now they'll step aside for progress, she cut him off. Unless anyone has a better idea for attracting the modern diner. I thought of the letter in my pocket, the one I'd received last week, but its timing wasn't right, not yet. The staff will need extensive training, Tyler was saying. New techniques, new equipment. I suggest we close for 2 weeks for a complete kitchen overhaul. 2 weeks, just enough time to destroy 50 years of culinary heritage. Of course, Amanda smiled. Bella can stay on as sous chef if she's willing to learn the new methods, under Tyler's direction, naturally. And there it was, the final insult. Not just erasing my grandmother's legacy, but demoting her granddaughter to make way for modern trends. Actually, I said calmly, I'd like to propose a compromise. Amanda's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. Oh, give me 1 month. Let me keep one dish on the menu, my grandmother's ragu. If it doesn't outperform your modern offerings, I'll step aside completely. Tyler laughed. A pasta sauce against molecular gastronomy? That's hardly a fair competition. Afraid of a little tradition. I challenged softly. Amanda studied me for a long moment. Fine, 1 dish, 1 month. But when it fails, you leave without protest. And we get your grandmother's recipe book. I felt Marco stiffen beside me, but I nodded. Agreed. But if my dish succeeds, I get equal say in the restaurant's future direction. Define succeeds, Robert interjected. Simple. If my ragu generates more revenue and better reviews than any of your modern dishes, I stay, with authority to protect our traditional menu. Amanda's smile was cold. Done. Though I can't imagine anyone choosing old-fashioned pasta over cutting-edge cuisine. If she only knew what that letter in my pocket said. If she only understood what was really at stake. The meeting continued, Tyler outlining his plans for transforming our classic Italian kitchen into a laboratory of modern gastronomy. I sat quietly, remembering the afternoons I'd spent in this kitchen as a child, watching my grandmother coax magic from simple ingredients. Starting tomorrow, Amanda announced as the meeting ended, we begin our transformation. Bella, you can have your little corner of the kitchen for your experiment. Try not to get in the way of progress. I returned to my kitchen, where the ragu still simmered perfectly. Charlotte was waiting, worry clear on her face. They're really doing it, changing everything. I stirred the sauce, inhaling the aroma that held 50 years of history. Not everything. Not yet. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Reservation confirmed for tomorrow. Table 12. Noon. I smiled, thinking of the letter that had arrived last week. The one announcing a Michelin inspector's upcoming visit to evaluate us for our first star. The one I hadn't told my in-laws about. Amanda thought she was modernizing Castello's to attract attention. She had no idea that the culinary world's most prestigious recognition was already interested, not in molecular gastronomy, but in the authentic Italian cuisine we've been serving for generations. Tomorrow, a Michelin inspector would sit at table 12. And while Tyler's modern creations might impress with their novelty, I knew what truly earned Michelin stars. Perfection. Consistency. Dishes that told a story and carried forward a legacy. My grandmother had once told me, in cooking, as in life, timing is everything. As I adjusted the flame under my ragu, I knew she'd been right. Sometimes the best response to those who would erase tradition isn't to fight them, but to let them discover its value for themselves. Tomorrow would beget discovery. I opened the recipe book again, though I knew every word by heart. My grandmother's elegant handwriting seemed to dance on the page. Remember, Isabella, good food isn't about trends or techniques. It's about love, patience, and the courage to stay true to what matters. Tomorrow, Amanda would learn exactly what mattered in the culinary world. And it wasn't foam, spheres, or deconstructed anything. It was authenticity, tradition, and a perfectly simmered ragu, made exactly the way it had been for 50 years. The next morning, I arrived at Castello's before dawn, as I had every day for the past decade. The kitchen was quiet except for the gentle bubbling of my ragu, which had been simmering all night. Today, everything would change. Tyler's team was already unloading equipment in the adjacent prep area: centrifuges, thermal circulators, nitrogen tanks. The tools of modern gastronomy invading our traditional kitchen like alien spacecraft. The dining room is being refreshed too, Charlotte reported, helping me check the ragu. Mrs. Castello hired designers to make it look more contemporary. I nodded, tasting the sauce. Perfect, just as my grandmother had taught me. Table 12 is still untouched. Yes, though Amanda thinks it's ridiculous to reserve one table for your experiment during the renovation. If she only knew who would be sitting at that table at noon. The morning passed in controlled chaos. Tyler's team practiced their molecular creations while our regular staff struggled to adapt to the new equipment. The dining room echoed with the sounds of construction as workers replaced our traditional decor with modern minimalism. At 11:30, Amanda swept through the kitchen in designer heels, Tyler at her side. "Everything ready for your last stand?" she asked, eyeing my simmering pot with disdain. "The ragu is perfect," I replied simply. "Well, we have a full house for lunch, all excited to try our new menu. Your traditional offering will be available, of course, though I doubt anyone will choose it over Tyler's innovations." I said nothing, watching the clock tick closer to noon. Charlotte caught my eye, nodding slightly. She'd spotted someone entering the restaurant, someone alone, carrying a small notebook. The lunch service began with a flourish. Tyler's creations emerged from the kitchen like science experiments. Foams, gels, spherified liquids arranged with tweezers on stark white plates. The dining room buzzed with excitement over the novelty. Then he arrived at table 12. Middle-aged, unremarkable in his gray suit, but I recognized the way he studied everything. The table setting, the service, the ambience. The Michelin inspector took his seat as Amanda rushed to greet him, obviously mistaking him for a regular customer. "Welcome to the new Castello's," she gushed. "You're just in time to experience our cutting-edge menu. Perhaps you'd like to try our deconstructed carbonara sphere with pasta air?" The inspector smiled politely. Actually, I heard this was the place for authentic Italian cuisine. Traditional ragu, if I'm not mistaken. Amanda's smile faltered. Oh, we do have one traditional dish available. Though I really recommend. The ragu, please, he said firmly, and a glass of the house Barolo. I began plating his order personally, every element precise yet rustic, the pasta perfectly al dente, the ragu coating each strand exactly as it should, the fresh basil adding color and aroma. This wasn't just food. It was 3 generations of culinary heritage on a plate. The inspector took his first bite in silence. Then another, and another. He made notes between bites, his expression unreadable. Around him, other diners were experiencing Tyler's modern menu. Some seemed impressed by the novelty, others confused by the foams and spheres. But I noticed something interesting. They kept glancing at table 12, at the simple but perfect plate of pasta that smelled like an Italian grandmother's kitchen. "Excuse me," a woman at the next table called to her server. "Could I try what he's having? It smells amazing." One by one, other diners began requesting the ragu. Tyler's molecular creations, while visually stunning, couldn't compete with the aroma of tradition wafting through the dining room. The inspector finished his meal and requested to see the chef. Amanda started to gesture to Tyler, but the inspector shook his head. "No," he said clearly. "The chef who made this ragu." In the kitchen, away from the dining room's chaos, he introduced himself properly and confirmed what I'd known. He was indeed from Michelin. "This sauce," he said, consulting his notes, "it's been made the same way for how long?" 50 years, I replied. "My grandmother's recipe, unchanged." He nodded. "I can taste the heritage, the technique. This is what we look for, not trends or gimmicks, but perfection in tradition." He paused. "Though I understand you're changing the menu, not if I can help it," I said quietly, and told him about our agreement. 1 month to prove traditional cuisine could outperform modern gastronomy. "Interesting," he mused, "because this ragu alone is worth serious consideration for a star. But if it disappears from the menu..." The kitchen door burst open as Amanda entered, Tyler close behind. "Bella, half the dining room is ordering that old-fashioned pasta. Can't you see we're trying to move forward?" The inspector cleared his throat. "Mrs. Castello." Perhaps I should introduce myself properly. What followed was a masterclass in culinary reality. He explained exactly what Michelin looks for: consistency, quality, respect for ingredients, and tradition. Innovation had its place, he acknowledged, but not at the expense of perfect execution. A restaurant like Castello's, he concluded, with 50 years of refined technique and authentic recipes, is exactly what we seek to recognize. Assuming, of course, these traditions are maintained. Amanda's face went pale as understanding dawned. You're from Michelin?" "Yes. And I must say, it would be a shame to lose such a perfect ragu too." He glanced at Tyler's workstation, where a centrifuge was separating ingredients into layers, modern experiments. The next few hours were a blur of revelations and negotiations. The inspector's opinion carried weight that even Amanda couldn't ignore. By evening, decisions had been made. Tyler's molecular gastronomy equipment was relocated to a separate test kitchen. The dining room renovation was halted, our traditional decor preserved. And most importantly, my grandmother's recipes were restored to their rightful place at the heart of our menu. "We can explore modern techniques," I told Amanda as we reviewed the compromise, "but as additions to our traditional offerings, not replacements. Our heritage is our strength." She nodded slowly, finally understanding. "A Michelin star for pasta sauce." "For perfection," I corrected. "For 50 years of getting it exactly right." The following month proved our decision correct. Word spread about the possible Michelin recognition. Food critics arrived to experience our traditional cuisine. Even Tyler admitted that learning our classic techniques made him a better chef. 1 year later, we received the official news. Castello's had earned its first Michelin star. The citation specifically mentioned our ragu, praising its perfect execution of time-honored techniques. That evening, after service, I found Amanda in the kitchen, watching me stir the next day's sauce. "I was wrong," she said quietly, "about everything. I thought modern meant better." "Modern isn't bad," I replied, "but it needs roots. Foundation. That's what my grandmother understood." I opened the recipe book, showing her the notes in the margins, the wisdom passed down through generations. She didn't just leave us recipes, she left us a legacy. Marco joined us, loosening his tie. Mom finally understands why I married a chef instead of a businesswoman. I married both, he winked at me. Someone who knows both tradition and innovation. We expanded thoughtfully over the next few years. A modern test kitchen for special events, cooking classes teaching traditional techniques, even a small molecular gastronomy menu. But always alongside, never replacing, our classic dishes. The ragu remained our signature dish, simmering every day just as it had for 50 years. Each morning, as I stirred it in the quiet kitchen, I could almost hear my grandmother's voice. Remember, Isabella, trends come and go, but tradition is timeless. She was right, of course. In a world of foams and spheres and deconstructed dishes, there's still nothing quite like the perfect plate of pasta, sauce made with patience and love, served exactly as it should be. The Michelin star gleamed in our entryway, but the real treasure was in my pocket, my grandmother's recipe book, still guiding us forward while keeping us true to our past. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply staying true to what you know is right and letting time prove you correct. After all, a properly simmered ragu, like the best traditions, only gets better with time.